ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணி
இன்னொரு பிரச்சனை மதிய ஹாஸ்டல்ல சாப்பிட்டு டக்குனு காலேஜ் வர முடியாது.
அங்க சாப்பிட்டா
ஆமா,
அப்ப இங்க வந்து சாப்பிட்டேன்.
அது ஒண்ணுதான் பிரச்சனை.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us in this afternoon session. I take this opportunity to welcome and introduce our next resource person, Dr. David Wellesley, Assistant Professor of English, Madras Christian College, Chennai. He is doing research on theatre and performance. He is researching and writing on cricket literature. He is also teaching drama and training students in theatre. He has produced many plays and trained students in language skills using theatre exercises. He has performed and directed plays for Curtain Call and Theatre Wing in the Department of English, University of Madras. He has directed plays for Theatre Earring and Theatre Wing in the Department of English, Madras Christian College. He directed the annual play of Women's Christian College, Chennai in 2018. He conducted various theatre workshops in Madras Christian College and various colleges across Tamil Nadu. And I welcome and invite our resource person to deliver his lecture on the subject of research in literary and cultural studies.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr. Ajanta and the professors at SRNMR College and the participants in this webinar. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity, and thank you for taking time out to invite me and making all these arrangements. And we can see nearly 70 of us are here, and I consider this a great honor to be part of this exercise. This afternoon, I would share with you some of the thoughts and ideas that not only me, but as my professors and the things I learned from my students, all of those put together, I would like to share with you regarding research. And if I'm allowed to share the screen, I should be able to, yeah, I think I am allowed. So let me start off. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yes. So now if you notice the title of my talk today, it's called The Subject of Research in Literary and Cultural Studies. Now, before going any further into this, let me first of all explain to you the title itself. Why do I have the word subject of research? What do I mean by subject, and why do I have the word subject within single quotes? Now, when you turn to Oxford Dictionary gives you nearly 5 meanings of the word subject. I've only taken 2 because those are the 2 things that we are going to talk about. In fact, one of those things particularly. Now, if you take the meaning of subject, the first meaning is a person or thing that is being discussed. The second meaning is a branch of knowledge studied or taught in school or college. Now, for the most part, we have been used, because we have been in academics. The second meaning is something that we have been used to more often than not. Subject as a branch of knowledge studied or taught in school or college. So when we say subject, we talk about, we assume that the meaning is some kind of a content or theme or topic that we are going to talk about. But the first meaning is something we hardly think about or assume when we use the word subject. Subject means an individual also, a person. And that is why that word in the title is very important. Now, when you look at with that first meaning, the subject of research, we are not talking about any topic of research. We are not talking about any branch of knowledge. We are talking about the individual who's conducting the research. Who is this individual? That is what I think is more important when we talk about research. So the focus is on the first meaning, the individual. So it is in that sense that I have used the word subject in the title. Now, before I go any further, I would like to have a small disclaimer. This disclaimer is something that you find it in movies before they start off. Now, whatever I'm going to talk about, the individual who is conducting the research, the subject of research, that does not replace any existing methods. There are several workshops being conducted on research methodology. There are several workshops on research writing. All of those things are important. Now, what I'm going to speak is not to replace those things. So let me read out the disclaimer. The discussion on researchers' importance to the research is not to replace any existing methods. All methods work in their specific conditions, but focusing on the personal experiences of the researcher in connection with the research can ease anxiety, operate as ignition to diffident researchers, open up avenues and perspectives otherwise difficult to achieve. So this I thought I wanted to present to you before. So most of us as researchers are diffident in the beginning. Most of us have a lot of anxiety conducting research, beginning from MA when you are asked to do a dissertation. The anxiety of research. Therefore, where do we begin? How to do things? All these things are difficult questions. So out of my experience and out of the things that I learned from my teachers and also from my wards, how they went about, I collected some ideas and I want to share those things with you. Now, so who is this researcher? It is an individual or a group, mostly an individual. And this individual's experience, does it have any importance in connection with the topic that that particular person is conducting the research on? Sometimes what we do is it's true that research must be objective. Research must be objective in the sense must be unbiased. It must not be merely a momentary fleeting. I hope I'm being heard. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Right. So sometimes what happens is in our search for objectivity, in our search for trying to present a foolproof thesis. A foolproof thesis, what do I mean by that? A thesis that will not have any mistakes. A thesis that will have all the proof that is there to support your arguments. So your materials, your arguments, your secondary materials. In search of all these things, sometimes we miss out one thing. That is, in our search for objectivity, we have the relation between the researcher and the research. That is kept apart that has been kept apart for a long time. So this is where I think I want to recollect or recall that many researchers have had a personal connection with their topic because of some personal experiences, and that only added value to the thesis. So that eased out the anxiety, that gave them an ignition to a point of beginning. They may go from there anywhere else, but to begin, a personal experience can go a long way. Derrida in one interview says, when he's asked what is the object, what is the status of the object, Derrida says if there is any object at all. In other words, what he is trying to say is that when we make a comment about some object, it is more or less a comment about ourselves. Meaning, when we say we like something or we don't like something, more than a comment about some external object, it is a revelation of one's own likes and dislikes. It's part of that. So when then the ultimate object in one sense is the subject itself. That's the individual who is making a comment about an external object. In other words, he's trying to reveal himself. He's trying to uh, discover something in himself. So in one way, all our research work in the humanities is a discovery of human nature in several different ways. And that is why literary studies and cultural studies in those things, this importance of the relation between researcher and research is very important. We have to pay attention to that as well. So with humanities, what happens is uh, sometimes since the subject of study and the object of study in humanities at the end of the day is the human being. If you look at any field of study within humanities, all of them are trying to find out what is human nature. How does it benefit the human? Or how the human nature can make life better for himself or herself. And all humanities is going towards that direction. Therefore, when it comes to humanities, the object of study and the subject of study is the human being. So if you take any literature, even though it is talking about animals, even though it may be talking of, even though if it is some science fiction, or even if it is some fable, or if it is some kind of a magical realism, where things are all, or fantasy literature, where things are not real at all. But through all of that, there is going to be a discussion about humanity, a discussion about human nature. You can I'll take out any C.S. Lewis's works. Although it is Narnia, it looks like a fantasy novel. It does talk about, at the end of the day, coming back to reality, coming out of the wardrobe, going into reality, and talking about those experiences. So, in one way or the other, however fantastical it may be, it is rooted in reality. I always had given this explanation that without a bird, we cannot think of an airplane. There must be a model in reality for us to create something outside. So even in Narnia, you see all kinds of different kinds of creatures. There's one who's half man and half horse. Now that, although it is highly ingenious to come up with such a kind of a creature, in mythology, in Greek mythology, such creatures are many creatures are there like that, but they're all in real. There's a human being, there's a horse, you put them together. So you can see that the object of study and the subject of study come together, because even in our fantasy, there is a rootedness in reality. And let me go back to the other word. When I said the subject of research, I want to consider that word research also a little closely. Now, when you go back to any definition of research, it more or less looks like this: an activity that looks to add new knowledge or a new dimension to existing knowledge. That's what we do, right? Now, we know a lot of things about Shakespeare, but if somebody writes a paper on Shakespeare, giving us another area that we didn't know, another dimension, we call it a new paper. We call it a research paper, simply because they add a dimension to existing knowledge. But the fact remains that we consider very limited things as knowledge. We don't consider a lot of things as knowledge. And that is why we think what comes from books is knowledge. So there itself is a very small line we have drawn. We have made it a very, a limited space to consider certain things. as knowledge. So any existing branch of knowledge like science or biology, physics or economics or history, these are things we think branches of knowledge, but we don't consider many of the things as knowledge. Look at these things. We hardly consider our everyday things as knowledge. What is knowledgeable when you walk across a place where lots of tens and many boys are playing cricket, multiple games of cricket would be playing. You don't even give a second glance at it. You may want to see what's happening, but you're not going to consider that as a phenomenon for you to think philosophically, for you to think in, what can I do about this for my research? Now, you're not thinking that that knowledge about some, on Sunday morning, there were so many boys playing cricket on the ground, multiple games. You can see they are also confused. It's so confusing for us outside, but they are not confused. They are playing really well. Do we ever wonder about it? All right. And do we ever wonder? Those are some of the things I've been wondering over the years. Is like suddenly over last period of time in our main road, there are a lot of specialized biryani shops or specialized lassi shops. There's a lassi shop here. There's a kulfi shop here. There's a shop only for jeans. There's a shop only for lingerie. These are not there last 10 years. In the last before that, these are developments in the last 5-6 years. How do we see that? How do we see this whole idea of specialization that's taking place in the area of food, in the area of food, clothes, in the area of sports? How is this going to account for? Who's going to account for it? We generally think that it has to be written in a novel. It has to appear as a short story. Only then we'll go there. Of course, that text is important, but we try to come to reality from some text instead of going from reality to text also, because from experience to text also. So as I see all these things, I remember a text that we read. It's called a small essay called "Further Progress in Specialization" by Stephen Leacock. And if you happen to get it, please read it. And then that text where he's talking about a specialized saloon for haircut. So when you go to the haircut, there's one fellow to cut your hair, there's one fellow to shave your whiskers, there's one fellow to shave your beard, one fellow to take your ear, clip your hair from your nose or ears. There are specialized fields. He's making the fun of all the kinds of specializations that is taking place. So you can look at that text, look at your experience, something that you watched over a period of years. Why can't we work on it? Is it possible? Then we will, once we start thinking about that, there will be possibilities of working at a personal level also. It becomes your knowledge. It becomes something that you are contributing because it is your experience. So I would like to talk now, share some of my experiences about my research, how my research was also somewhere connected with some experience of that kind. From my childhood, whenever I watched a cricket match, or all the time I do, I never stopped watching the cricket match after the last ball is bowled. For me, that's not the end of the game. The end of the game is when all the other experts and all the other cricket experts or the interviews of all the people, they go on talking till midnight. I will keep listening to all of them. It's just an experience. It's something that I passionately watched cricket over the years. Harsha Bhogle would be talking, Sunil Gavaskar would be talking, Ravi Shastri would be talking, and I'd be just listening to them and all the technicalities they speak about, paying close attention, never even thinking that in future I will do some research on cricket. It's just something that I did out of some boyish passion, and then that continued for years. And when the next day in the newspaper also, when I'm reading articles, I'm not just looking at the scorecard. I'm reading the article more than once, 2 times, 3 times, again and again, and connecting with what I watched yesterday. Somehow trying to deal with reality and textuality in that manner. there's a combination of that. My reality is watching TV. Next day, somebody has written about the same thing. I have seen that earlier, and I've seen somebody else write about it. And sometimes I wonder, why did I not think like that? Why did I didn't get a sentence like that? So that experience was there, is something that was useful when I came to MA, and my guide said, you can work on something that you like most. When he asked me that simple question, when I went to him, he said, what do you like most? He said, I like cricket. Well, why don't you work on cricket? And then we didn't know where to go. We started off with a book, and then it led to some fiction on cricket, written only then in that year. And somehow, luckily, we moved on from MA to MPhil, where I worked on cricket literature. And meanwhile, I was also being trained in theater by Rajani sir, and he was making me involved in theater seriously for the next 2-3 years while I was in MA and MPhil. When I went to PhD, he and my professors, they urged me to do something serious on theater. And so the experience doing theater, watching Rajani sir direct plays, and me acting on stage, those experiences, and me beginning to direct and writing from the rehearsals every day, all of those things helped me to do the thesis on theater and performance. During that time, during my research, my professor would keep saying, write a journal, every experience, every day rehearsal, after every day's rehearsal, write a journal, write for 500 words every day or 1 page every day, based on that experience of that day. I didn't do all of that. I did sometimes when I felt like writing, I did put down certain of my thoughts, which actually helped in the chapterization, in the core things in a chapter. So this experience, what had happened was, it wasn't merely a reading from a book and writing from that book, but also processing it through one's own experience, so that you kind of have a uniqueness, add some uniqueness to it. So, and this local boys playing cricket on the ground, the multiple games, is something very important. Although I never wrote on it, my professor was urging me to write. But what happened was, after I joined MCC, when I was directing a play, we were rehearsing near a cricket ground just next to, it's the boundary side of a cricket ground. And while I was rehearsing there, we were doing Shakespeare's monologues. Some boys would come and play cricket. Both of those things used to happen parallelly. And that I thought was an important thing that I should record. So there have been articles written on stage performances. I have also written on stage performances, how different things came together, how the text is transported onto the stage, and the things involved in that particular transportation. But this rehearsal space, particularly around a cricketing ground, ignited something in me, and then that led to writing a paper on rehearsal space, where what I generally talk about in that paper is that difference between rehearsal space and the stage space. Rehearsal space is more open, and it's not limited as much as the stage space is limited, because once your stage space, you're going on stage, it's like you're starting a story and then you have to end it. You cannot break it. But with rehearsals, it will be easily broken, particularly when a ball from the cricket ground, when somebody scores a boundary and this past one of our actors, this rehearsal is broken, and then reality comes into the rehearsal. Again, the reality goes away when you throw the ball to them. Again, you start another play world. So this interaction between the play world and the real world is something that I wrote in that article. But that is possible only because the dependence was there on the personal experience. So the involvement of the individual experience in research can go a long way in giving you the subtle perspectives as well. So when it came to talking about guiding MA dissertations, there are the same things that I followed what my professor also did. First, ask the student what they like. And from there on, you kind of see it going into many different fields as such, because we're going to take into account the personal experiences of that student. So Jolene, when she came to me, the first thing that she told me was, "Sir, I'm not interested in reading." So although it might just be a little shocking in the beginning, it's like, how can you do a research without reading? But we can make her read by trying to connect it with what is she mostly interested in. And so when I asked her, what else are you interested in, if not reading? Then she said, I pets, I like pets, and then I watch animation movies. So, and music, she said. We tried on music, it didn't work out for us. So we focused on dogs. So she likes dogs. So we try to look out for dogs in literature. From Homer, if you see, there have been representations of dogs in literature, picked out several of them, did a survey of all dog representations, the representations of dog in literature. And finally, we found a novella, a small, short one, written by Virginia Woolf called Flush. Flush is the dog of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, about which there are some diary entries that Barrett Browning had written. And based on that Flush, Virginia Woolf had written a novel. Now, whenever we talk about Virginia Woolf, we would go to so many other novels, right? We would go to The Lighthouse or Mrs. Dalloway. Hardly we talk about Flush because we hardly know, even I didn't know that Flush was a novel by about a dog written by Virginia Woolf. But because we go from a personal point of view, we can identify things that we otherwise don't identify. And then that's how her thesis came out. It was called Caninization of Humans and Animals in Literature and Film. So she also took up one chapter was on Flush, one chapter was on one animation movie, how dogs are represented in movies and literature. That went on like that. And Arun Kumar also, again, more interested in watching lots of movies. So he has a list of movies that he watched. And I asked him recently, what did you watch? And he said he watched a Malayalam version of Motorcycle Diaries. That's not a novel, that is a memoir written by Che Guevara, his experiences of travels in Latin America. And so we thought, okay, we'll work on those things. And so that is why the title came out as Riding Between Memoir and Fiction. These two forms, when it comes out as a cinema, kind of a feature film, it's almost comes out as a fictionalized version of the reality that is represented in the memoir. But even while we are reading in the book, we realize that the book itself had qualities of fiction in it. And so that interaction between fiction and memoir as different forms is something that we worked on. And in many ways, over the years, I've seen my friends, my colleagues, and my students who worked on, when we focused on this personal aspect, then we saw that they are going into different layers, different areas, bringing in so much of interdisciplinarity to literary research and into cultural studies. One was theater and performance, music was one, sports is another, then culinary literature, people focused on food, and digital humanities, there were theses on memes. 2 or 3 theses were done on memes, and particularly in Tamil Nadu, you couldn't go past Vadivelu, and there were theses done on Vadivelu's comedies also. These are in English departments. So we find something relevant in the textual side also, and try to connect it with some of these cultural dimensions also. And medical humanities, we've had a student who personally wanted to study MBBS but could not. And so when she comes into literature, she's able to find some kind of a connection because the personal liking to a particular subject is there. In the same way, psychology, there's a student who worked on calendar and the design of a calendar, the design of t-shirts and paintings and literature. There are many of the students who worked on that. One student did an assignment on just the book covers. So there are no limitations when we go from the personal side, because that opens up avenues in terms of you can do work on any idea. It need not necessarily mean only that it has to be post-colonialism or diaspora or some of the ideas, stock titles that stock fields that we have. Moving on from that, if you take it from your personal side, there are possibilities for several avenues. So let me talk to you about how this approaching methodology. So idea or pattern in your own personal experience. So that is what you see in the rehearsal paper. Uh, uh, you watch your own rehearsal happening, you watch the reality and the real world and the play world happening, and you observe. When you observe it, that pattern will give you certain perspectives. So it's all about identifying and locating a certain kind of a pattern in the way things are taking place. That means we need to be observant not only of ourselves but also of the things that is happening around us. And here is two things: reading reality, that is, and living texts. The way we read texts and the way we live reality also needs to be interchanged. We need to look at things around us as if we are reading a text. Now, when we are reading a text, you know how closely we read a text, how closely we see patterns, how we see connections between this stanza and that stanza, and how we see, okay, first stanza has 4 lines, second stanza has 6 lines, third stanza has 8 lines. Oh, is increasing 2 and 2 and 2. All these things, patterns you kind of notice, right? And in the same way, if we can notice such patterns even in your everyday experiences, there will be possibilities for identifying, locating that form, and trying to add that as a valuable observation in your research. So, as Derrida said, there is nothing outside the text. In other words, if there is nothing outside the text, then everything must be text. So, there is a great possibility to textualize everything. Because when I say textualize, what I mean is identify a pattern. Understand that everything is in one way or the other constructed. And so when we are able to see the constructedness of reality, then we'll be able to see the pattern in it. And it is in that sense, for me, if you notice that textualization is an important process to study, because there can be a general question to all of us. Look, these are all fleeting moments in reality, and how to capture that. Just is it taking pictures, taking videos? Yes, they are all important. Showing pictures or videos as part of your proof can only go so far. More than that, the discussion and the argument must have some consistency. And if your argument has consistency, it comes from the observation of some pattern in it. And how do you observe the pattern in reality? By trying to look at it as a text, by reading reality. That is why I said reading reality and living texts. Because for us, generally, we read texts and we live reality. But if you turn that upside down, you can become more research oriented. In other words, what I'm trying to say is research is not just what you do. It's not just what you read and how you write. Research is also an attitude towards everything that is happening around you. So the questioning is always there. Why, how, who, connection between the things, what happened here, what happened there, and what happened here. All of those things, if you connect it, that is what you call as a research attitude. And recently, as I was watching documentary filmmaker Ramni's interview, when they asked him, how do you document, how do you structure your film, your documentary film, because every documentary film is in one way a research product or a thesis in itself. And he says the need to make the film is largely to discover the film or sense the film. That means he is so observant that he doesn't see the film after watching. He sees the film even before he is going for shooting. That means the things that he has observed, he knows that there is a film inside it. So what happens is the observation and the pattern that he finds in it is what is telling him that he wants to discover the film. And he says that his style of documentary filmmaking is impressionistic, is subjective. He finds, he says, there's some shruti, there's some structure that he deeply connects with. Unless he deeply connects with the film, he is not making that movie. He makes that film only when he finds a personal connect with that. So he's clearly dependent on the idea of experience itself. And this is how he makes the statement. It says, if the experience is strong enough, the information contained is also good enough. So sometimes we think this is my experience, but is it good enough for research? But here the filmmaker says, yes, if the experience is strong enough, information contained is also good enough. Now, let's go to the mode of analysis. Some examples I would like to give. Let me introduce to you an important anthropologist called Clifford Geertz, who wrote an article called Deep Play, Notes on Balinese Cockfighting. Now, if you take up that article, you would read an analysis of a cultural event in Bali. The cultural event is the competition of cockfighting that is held in Bali, and we know it's there in several of the rest of the world also. So it's got a great history. Our own Vetrimaran and Dhanush have made a movie also. So it's such a very important or a thriving area of field. It's not so much the topic of Balinese cockfighting that is interesting in that article. It's the way Clifford Geertz writes about it. He begins the article by talking about how he and his wife went to that particular village and how they were received and how those people treated them. Like it's most of them didn't even pay attention to them. It's almost as if these two people did not even exist for them for several days. And only after several days, it's almost as if they have gone through rites of passage. And only after that, there is some kind of a attention given to them. He hasn't even talked about cockfighting yet. For almost first 4 or 5 paragraphs, he's only talking about himself, his experience, his wife, and then the people, how they treated him. This whole context that he's given would help us to understand the whole dimension, the whole mood of it with which they would look at it. Now, why do they treat them like that? Why do those people not pay attention to these people? You will understand towards the end of it, because cockfighting in Bali by then had become illegal, and these two people are also not seen as insiders, they are seen as outsiders. They may also be spies, because the cockfighting has been taking place illegally only, away from the eyes of the police. And so there's always, with an eye of suspicion, these two people are looked at for the first 10 days. Only later, Geertz also comes to know about it. And so you can see there is this description helps us to not only understand the surface level pattern of the cockfighting, not just about the rules of cockfighting, how the game is played, how many players are there, who loses, when is the loss, when is the victory, what happens when one wins, when one loses. There's not just the structure of the game, but the structure of the society itself. So in other words, what Geertz is saying is, by knowing about cockfighting, we know about the society. So it's not, the topic is not cockfighting as such. Cockfighting is only a medium through which to understand the people. And so that context is so important. That is why in your mode of analysis, in what context are you trying to say this? Say whatever you're saying in your research is very important. So if it comes from a personal point of view, you will have enormous amount of context to give to the reader. It gives you a holistic vision. And non-experts also. In fact, the call Balinese cockfighting, anybody can read from any field and consider it to be quite easy to grasp or very accessible to all of us. So the language is also very narrative. That is almost, it's as if, the anthropologist calls it as thick description. That kind of writing is called thick description. When you read about thick description or you read a thick descriptive text, you almost feel that you are reading a short story. You're reading something from the mode of literature. So anthropology is picking a mode of writing that belongs to the field of literature, and we are in the field of literature. Why can't we take it up then? That is what my question is. So just because we are using objective language without using I, without using any reference to myself, me, we cannot assume that we will achieve unbiased or objectivity. At the same time, just because we are using words I or subjective language doesn't mean we negate objectivity completely. Real objectivity, real unbiased research can happen only when there is consistency of ideas. And obviously in fiction, you do see happening. It's a model of the fiction itself. The coherence of argument. That's because when you identify the pattern in whatever you see and in your own experiences. So thick description itself is a mode from the purview of fiction. So why not use it to study literature and culture? Finally, technical jargon. Now we are at a time when using technical jargon has become an important thing, because whether one person is understood or not, but if that person uses jargon, it's generally considered to be some kind of a expert in that area. But most of George Wally is a professor from Queen's University. His articles were mostly based on his experience. He translates poetics, and then based on his translation of poetics, he writes an article called Translating Poetics. He taught poetry, and then he writes teaching poetry. So it comes from that experience. When that comes, his articles have a very live and throbbing feeling to them. So in fact, he does not even prefer the word research for literary studies. He would rather have it as humane studies. So because he finds that using the word even research or other technical jargon as slightly irresponsible and even meretricious. So why is it? Here he says, careful discussion of the nature and purpose of learning and education does not require jargon, and is likely to be the more honest and perceptive, the less it relies upon jargon and other imprecise uses of language. In fact, in that very paragraph, he goes on to say that not there is no, by the critical jargon by itself is not anything bad, but when you use it in inappropriate conditions, when it is not fitting, then only it becomes bad. By itself, the word is not bad. The using of that word is not bad, but where do you use jargon? If there is a possibility that you can use a simpler term instead of a jargon so that your reader can be able to be accessible to it, it's better that way. Unless and otherwise it's accounted for, unless and otherwise it is warranted, you use a critical term. Otherwise, if it is not warranted, if a better word, if a simpler word is useful for the reader to be accessible to what you're saying, then that much the better. So this is what George Wally talks about using technical jargon. So in that sense, the technical jargon, when it becomes less important, because your experience gives you another kind of language, the language that you can talk to one person and be relatable with that person. Unless that who the reader that you're talking to is also somebody with whom the technical jargon goes, you can use. Otherwise, the personal experience will give you a language. That language you can use to come up with your own conclusions. And so the personal experience cannot be discounted from your conclusions. And this I wanted to share finally with you when he writes, George Wally, in that very article, he says, behind every utterance, there is a person. It is not simply the words that mean, it is a person who means. And what the person means, intends to convey or declare or conceal, and for what reason, is physically imprinted into the structure and texture of his language. The imprint of intention is not seldom at variance with the content of the words. To the perceptive ear, an utterance becomes not only a declaration by the writer, but also a disclosure of the writer. So, like I told you already, when you utter, you disclose yourself, you reveal yourself as well, whether you agree or not. Even if you have done a research on completely something that you have not experienced at all, even there, since you have written it, there is something about you, something about the individual, the researcher, that is embedded within that text. And it's important that we should be aware of what is embedded there. And finally, I would like to talk about Bakhtin, who said that research is, in one way, a dialogue between subject and object. There is an object, although Derrida asked that question, is there an object at all? Because the object only, in one way, is only an anomaly there, because it is only the subject that is revealing itself. But there is an object. There are things that you're talking about. They are real. You can touch and see. We cannot discount those things. Yet at an abstract level, you can say, you can deconstruct it. But in reality, they are there. They're concrete. The object is there. But there is also a subject. And this dialogue between the subject and the object of research, subject and object, is what actually ends up as research. So that is what I wanted to share with you. So before I conclude, I want to recall the disclaimer that I gave you. So the keeping the personal in mind helps in choosing topics that are closer to one's heart, adds value, unique value in terms of methodology, and freedom in the mode of analysis. That means in the way you want to write about it. So at this point, I would like to recall the disclaimer. So the discussion on researcher's importance to the researcher is not to replace any existing methods. All methods work in their specific conditions, but focusing on the personal experiences of the researcher in connection with the research can ease anxiety, also operate as an ignition to diffident researchers, open up avenues and perspectives otherwise difficult to achieve. So thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are a few questions in our chat. The first one is from Gurulata. How to conduct a research on culinary skill? Please give an example.
Now, there is no one way I can give you an answer to that, how to research on culinary skills. It's now, it will be a conversation. It should be a, first of all, I will tell you how it works. Now, if you are interested in culinary skills, then we both can talk about it. Once we discuss with what you are talking, there will be embedded within it certain pattern. When we identify that pattern, then we'll see if similar things have been, if not exactly the same thing, similar things or even dissimilar things are being written in some piece of literature. So based on our reading of literature, we will think about, okay, if you are talking about a particular food item, and I will look for some work written on that food item somewhere. Say you're talking about bananas, doing something with bananas. So I'm going to look for literature, something that talks about those things, and would advise you to read those works. And based on those works and your experience, we'll see how this how it connects. And it is a constant conversation, and we will evolve at a pattern only after we have that conversation. And it is also particularly connected with how you see it and how you tell me about that, about your culinary skills. If somebody else does that, it will be different for that person. And so there is no direct answer to that. It's only a matter of constant conversation.
Next one is from Shama. While we are working on blogs, some of those might be archived after a few years. What can be the way out for maintaining relevance of our research?
Can you be a little more louder?
Shama. While we are working on blogs, some of those might be archived after a few years. What can be the way out for maintaining relevance of our research?
While we're working on blogs, some of those might be archived for a few years. What can be the way of maintaining relevance of our research? See, when they get archived, it's very difficult to depend on those materials. If you give the URL, you can't go back there. You can't find such a things. So it's better to interpret the MLA in a way that you can put the same material that you accessed on internet in another format. For example, you can copy that element and paste it onto your Word file and probably put it on another platform and then quote that platform. Or you can put it on a CD and make it into a video if it is a video, and keep it as a VCD or a CD that you can quote. Those things are possible. It's all about how you create another form in which that same content will be available. You can't depend on internet for a long time. That is why they ask for the date of access. So if you give the date of access, more or less it will be accepted, simply because maybe after 3 years, if that website nobody touches, it might just go into archives. So it's better to give the date of access so that you will be authentic. Screenshots, yeah, they can help. You can take screenshots and put them in a format, in a format which is allowed by MLA. You can check the MLA, and then MLA gives you certain things for you can quote. You can quote, say, for example, SMS. You can quote emails. So emails are a very good idea. In fact, you can send everything to email and then quote your email. Email has date, email has time, email has your attachments. You can quote your emails. We have done that. So that is possible. So if you are suspicious that this material in this platform would not stay for long, it's better you pull it out from there, put it in a platform where it can stay permanent, as simple as sending an email to yourself or to somebody and then quote that email. That really works.
So another question from Gurulata. What is the difference between attitude of research and aptitude of research?
I don't know. Because in this context, when I see attitude of research, I see it as a personal trait that need not be only for people in the academics. Some people are really good at having this attitude. It's just their way of thinking. It's just a way of thinking. But I think aptitude of research is more technical, like your desire to do research within a particular structured way or in an institutionalized way. But an attitude of research is somebody who's never been to school can also still have an attitude of research. I've had an uncle who's hardly been to school, but his attitude towards life is to connect one incident to another incident to another incident, and that comes with an attitude of research. So that's what I think.
There is another question from Professor Elango Nadezum. Is there a demarcation between being carried away by the subjectivity and being detachedly objective with the subject of research?
Yes, this is the question I was waiting for. There is the demarcation. You can't really be carried away by subjectivity. You can't write stories all the time. That is also something I wanted to caution one about. Although that is why I made the disclaimer twice. The the disclaimer was made twice because all the other methods that you learned over the years are equally important because they're also personal in a way, because you learned them. So you've got to give that value to the other methods that you learned. This is not a replacing methodology. This is to try and see that if you can find it from an experiential point of view, it will be far more easier. That's all. But yes, when it comes to writing your thesis, making a presentation, you'll have to be extremely careful about, say, for example, just because you're focusing on your personal things, if you forgot about all the other literature that has come on that particular topic, or all the other scholars who have written on that topic, then you're not doing research. It's important that you know what others have done and also see where you go forward as well. So it should be a healthy combination of objectivity and subjectivity. But the only caution that I do is, in the name of objectivity, don't lose the fact that you are also doing that research and the individual is also important. Thank you, Ilango Natation sir, for that, because I think that caution I had to give to everyone. Yeah.
There is another from Anshita. She's saying she has never seen anything specifically as music literature, like medical humanities. How can we connect music and literature in research? Is it possible to do an interdisciplinary research on music and literature?
Yes, people have done it. I mean, I can give you contacts who can help you out in that front. Not only our own well-known persons that we know, but also so many others have written on music and literature. There is a course in our own department called Current Trends in Music and Literature. There's a teacher who's teaching them, so it's got a syllabus for itself. Maybe I can send that and make it possible. I'm not an expert in music, so I cannot comment on music and literature, but I've known that works have been done on music and literature, and it should definitely. When Bob Dylan was given the Nobel Prize, then you should know that it's a viable area for research. So that is interesting. You can contact me later. Maybe I can give you the other details.
Other from Neha Tiwari, she is asking whether you can find any suitable theory for such kind of research.
Yes, possibly. But that's, I can tell you, but I don't want to in a way, because it will go back to the old mold again. We will try to again apply a theory. That mold, if you take, for example, performance theory is what I actually spoke about. But I did not use the word performance theory. Because it's not just limited to what I just spoke about. It's far more than that. So part of performance theory is what I have presented to you. So in that sense, you can call it partly as performance theory. But then when we say performance, we'll have to, we cannot remain within texts. We cannot remain within text. We'll have to go beyond textual representations. We may have to go to some rituals or some practices that are taking place and try to include them both. When you're including a text and some practical thing, an activity that is taking place, any ritual or festival or sport or in action or theater, then you can call it as performance theory. Otherwise, if you're only dealing with texts, it's something that we have to be careful about. So that's why I'm careful about not giving that title.
Another one is from Dr. R. Margaret Karunya. She's asking whether any new idea to pursue research.
You are that new idea, sir. Your experience is that new idea. That's what I think, that if you look at yourself a little deeper and find in there certain things you've been reading for several years, maybe certain things you may be watching for several years, maybe never thinking that it is important. If you pay a little more attention to that from the research point of view, then it's possible that you can find something that nobody else found. What do we mean by new? New means things that nobody else know that you found. That's new. So in that sense, if you look inside, there will be a lot, I think. So for some of these questions like this, I can't answer with one word or one sentence. It comes with a lot of conversation. So you have to talk to me, you have to talk to some of my friends. Then over a period of time, we'll come up with things like, hey, you can do this. So that's possible. So I want to compare an article written 200 years ago in newspiece and television, which theory to apply. Neha Tiwari, I don't know what is that article and what is that news piece. Based on all those things, we have to think of it, and we'll have to first think about whether there is the necessity for any theory. If it is possible that you don't need any theory to explain the similarity, then don't use it. Only when you feel that there is a need, and only through a theory, if you can explain that, people will understand. If you feel that need, then you can use it. Otherwise, there's no need to use theory. Theory should not become an indispensable thing in research. If it is needed, you can use. If it's not needed, not necessary.
Sir, we have
Yes, you can get my email ID from Ajanta ma'am. She would share it.
Sir, I will share it with them. Thank you, sir. And thank you for such an illuminating lecture in this post-lunch session, especially. We express our sincere gratitude for accepting our invitation in a short notice and being a resource person for our webinar. A real resourceful session with a lot of real-life experiences and many literary references. You have given a clear picture of conducting research and how to deal with the research. Thank you once again for the more informative sessions.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for this opportunity. Thank you for all the patience and the questions. Thank you so much.
Dear participants, thank you for joining us today. And our first day is over now. Use the same Zoom link to join our webinar tomorrow. The meeting will start at 9:30 a.m. We will close the meeting at 2:40. You can fill your form before that.